Okay, happy Sunday. Looking forward to seeing everybody tomorrow. We're going to be focusing on graphing our sine and cosine and trig functions. Let's talk about periodic functions. Periodic functions are functions that will repeat themselves over and over again over a certain interval or period of time. Let's take this graph here. Let's start maybe right at the this point right there. We're going to go flat, up, flat, and then down. And then right here, we've completed one period because now we start from here on out, we start repeating ourselves. Okay, here's another flat period and up. So we did this graph from -2 and it went from -2 all the way to 4. So this period was 4 minus -2 was over an interval of 6. But this is a periodic function. It goes over, up, over, down, and then it's going to repeat the whole period all over again. Okay? Those are periodic functions. Okay? Here is our unit circle. These are both the same. But here's our unit circle. Okay? And something you better all be familiar with for tomorrow. Remember, we start off here on the x-axis and we go clockwise is positive, counterclockwise. That's counterclockwise is positive. Clockwise is a negative. Okay, this would be a negative pi 6, or all the way around would be positive 11 pi 6. Okay, anyway, we should all be familiar with this. The radius is 1, but remember this is cosine, sine, x, y. Cosine is basically your x, and sine is basically your y value. Okay? So, as we go around this graph, let's talk about let's say cosine. Right here, we start off at our starting point at 0 or 2 pi. Our cosine is 1. Our x, that's the length of this radius is 1. And as we move up, the length of this is a little shorter. It's root 3 over 2. And remember, your root 3 over 2 is about 0.866. Okay? And as we go up a little more, as we rotate around, this ends up being root 2 over 2, or 0.7. Okay? Okay, you all should be familiar with these. And then 1/2, 0, and then we start repeating ourselves as far as the value, but now cosine's negative over here. All right? So as we start graphing these, and you're going to graph these manually, let's talk about cosine. Let's make this 1 and -1. Okay? So we just said at 0, it was 1. If this is pi halves, this is going to be, every dash here is an interval of pi fourths, 3 pi fourths, okay? This would be 5 pi fourths, 3 pi halves, and this would be 7 pi fourths. So every interval is pi fourths. Here's pi halves, pi, and so on. So that's what my scale is. Every dash, the scale is pi fourths, or 45 degrees. So we start off at 1. At pi fourths, we're about 0.7. Okay, let me put this in black. At pi halves, we're 0. And then now we're past pi halves. Remember where we are past pi halves. Now we're in the negative x territory. And now as we start going down, 3 pi fourths is going to be about negative 0.7, root 2 over 2. And then -1 at pi. Okay? So these are kind of what you're going to be doing tomorrow. You should know these graphs. I'm not going to do all of them. We're going to do sine. Again, we're 0 at 3 pi halves, and we're back at 2 pi here. We're back at 1. Okay? If I go negative this way, it's the same thing. I'm going to get cosine's positive here and positive on this quadrant. Okay? But at negative pi fourths, I'm root 3 over 2, or 0.87. I'm sorry, Take that back again, guys. That's negative 30 degrees, negative pi 6. I'm root 3 over 2. Negative pi force this way. Okay, so at negative pi force, I'm 0.7. At negative pi halves, I'm 0. Okay? All the way negative pi. So you can see how this graph, we just need to know the values of the unit circle as we start off positive 1 to 0 to negative values to negative 1 to back to 0 back to positive 1. Okay? All right, so we'll also be doing, so notice a cosine curve at 0 is going to be 1, at pi is negative 1, but that's where it starts off. Unlike a sine curve, look at your sine values. Let me, if you look at your sine values, sine is 0 here, so sine, and then it's going to go to 1/2, root 2 over 2, up to being at 1 at pi halves. So sine is going to start off at 0, be 1 at pi halves, be 0 at pi. Okay, oops, this is, sorry about that. Forgot about my scale. Here's 1, negative 1. Okay, so we're going to start off at 0 for sine, and move up to 1 at pi halves, back at 0. Remember, pi, at 2 pi, 0, 2 pi, and pi, it's the x-axis. Your y or sine is 0. Okay? And here's your, so this, the difference is basically cosine will be 1 here, sine 0. The graphs look very similar. I can make this and transform this and shift this graph and make it look exactly like that. We'll be doing those transformations, okay? So be ready to go. The key thing is for tomorrow is know this unit circle. No, this is 30 degrees, 45, 60. Know your degrees, know your cosine sines, so you can manually graph these. And we'll be using the graphing calculator as well. Like I said, know the unit circle. Know it. I hope everyone still remembers that, okay? And like I said, we can graph back, from not only 0 to 2 pi, we can keep going to 4 pi, 6 pi, as long as you want to, and also go to negative territory, like so, okay? But you notice how it just keeps repeating itself, and the normal period for these graphs is 2 pi. Notice I start here, up at 1, I go down, hit a valley, come up, and boom, I'm back between 0 and 2 pi. And the same with sine. The interval for sine, or the period for sine, this is the period for sine, I start at 0, peak, back to 0, valley, back to 0. So that's 2 pi, and then we start repeating itself, okay? So the period for these cosine and sine graphs is 2 pi. So not a real intense 8 minutes, guys. That's all I want to spend. Be ready to go in the unit circle to graph these. We'll be changing the amplitude. Okay, and just want to get you ready to go tomorrow, okay? Have a good night.